This is a very interesting preface I read today on Substack um, from a guy who I can't quite work out what his full philosophy is, but this is a very useful starting place. Quote, people across the world are now demanding that Americans vote outside our religious, ethical, and moral obligations. End quote. Don't we already? I guess we don't. To me, this is an extraordinary concept. Are, quote, religious, moral, and ethical obligations the thing? And how, I ask sincerely, how does setting aside these obligations become the way to repudiating the U.S. policy of arming Israel, since the two viable candidates support this policy? From the books, the great books, the good books, I'd have thought all religious, moral, and ethical systems would reject what is being done in Palestine, or at least understand what it is, a justification, the job apparently of religion, to say that exterminating a people is necessary and righteous, which is what is being said. And I guess must be said by any maker of war in the modern world. We are doing this because, and as the big faiths have all acquiesced to the truth that the Allies in World War II were fighting a just war, every warmonger since has accused the other side of being fascist, Nazi, and or satanic. There was a Nazi justification too, an ethnic cleansing like the United States invasion and ethnic cleansing of North America, and now Israel doing the same in Palestine. What the quote at the top makes me think is that a community that goes to church has obligations to that church at home, and as it might exist worldwide, loyalty, I suppose, that overrides a personal morality. As I vote for Jill Stein, I am asked to feel like I am betraying my mostly Democratic friends. My personal moral absolute that ethnic cleansing is intolerable to me is nothing compared to my obligation to that group. This is a very hard truth, not personally, that dog doesn't hunt, but it hacks off at least 3/4 of what democratic choice means to me. Democracy is exactly where the personal meets the political. My bad, I should not have proclaimed my vote. The groupthink in any political party is a huge force in human discourse. I understand totally why my friends are voting against Donald Trump. I would be too if Biden hadn't said what he said after October the 7th, and Kamala has gone along. There is a deep and powerful pro-Israeli feeling in America, an identification with multiple deep roots that an old soldier like Bill Clinton spoke so clearly. Whatever reasons Hamas had for doing whatever it did on October the 7th are not equal to Israel's justification of what it has done and is doing in reprisal. This identification is convenient for the Americas. It is a shared messianism for which I have no time nor any tolerance. So I cannot be a member of that gang, I, in quotes, and I have no obligation to it. The reality that Trump unifies this gang is also not enough. At this stage, if I am to continue to remain friends with and colleagues of the Democratic anti-Trump gang, I will also hang with the Republican anti-Democratic gang. It's hard to pick them out. There is no longer enough difference for me to choose which one float in the parade over the other. Going forward, my constituency will be green. There is enough to tangle with in that gang, I can see already, but they are much more in line with where my personal meets the political. Perhaps the wisdom in the books are less important than the huddled tribalisms they clearly function as. The media is full of notions like Harris is losing the Muslim vote due to her stance on Israel. She's losing my vote too, as a mere unaffiliated human, a non-monotheist at least, and I bet there are millions of me's out there. I hope. It seems we are looking at teams now, bloodthirsty teams doing their creator's bidding. Except most articulate voices, the most qualified critics of what Israel is doing are Jews. The US election is a demonstration of uncritical choice. To castigate Israel is to criticize the US and vice versa, in that Netanyahu is right, and Harris knows this in her otherwise unintuitive bones. So I am asking, do these religious, moral, and ethical clubs demand loyalty so depraved that it eliminates free individual conscience, or are we assuming that morality and ethics are impossible without a God to insist? It would be good to know. From what I can gather, this is what most of us believe, and that is dark indeed. I don't know the intent behind the top quote. I admire the question it provokes a lot. All the religions are groupthinks by design, and they have values that make groupthink valuable. I respect this without sharing it, but I could never be loyal. That asks too much of me. It asks me to ignore my own values, wherever they come, and it is tyrannous. Religions are tyrannous, but the faithful agree to it. So who am I to disagree? There will be lots of confusions, bloody noses and hurt feelings, but since I'll not condemn you group thinking, please reciprocate. One for instance, for the time being. Many years ago, in 1983, so we don't imagine I have learned to be the way I am in the years in between, I was in a rehearsal of Hamlet. I was young and joyous, and particularly in this group. An equity meeting was announced. Suddenly, in the middle of a large scene, we stopped. The equity deputy, parenthesis, equity is the actors' union in Britain, end parenthesis, and were asked to vote on a resolution to strike in September 1983 if the theatres of Britain refused to raise actors' wages by £10 a week going forward. We all stood like greyhounds straining in the lists for the deputy to say, all in favour raise hands or say aye. It was a formality. The whole cast shot up hands, eager to get back to work on Hamlet, all except me. The director, who knew me well, laughed. I didn't not raise my hands because I thought actors were overpaid. I actually thought the money was great, livable, and work was super rewarding in every other way. Our tour was well over before the strike was due, so not much of a sacrifice there yet. I was just unclear. And I said, quote, am I to think that artistic directors of rep companies all over this country are twisting their mustachios and pocketing £10 a week per actor? I don't think they are. And I think their solution to this demand will be to do plays with smaller costs. End quote. Kind of like, convince me otherwise, talk to me, persuade me. The cast looked at me mostly, I think, because I had disagreed with the consensus enemy. So it began. I know there were similar incidents before at school, too many to name. The Russian invasion of Afghanistan, for instance, where I kept thinking about the young Russian soldiers sent off to die, and not that Russian Soviet still was a brainwashed nation of bloodthirsty automatons any more than any other army. No agreement on the enemy. By default, making me the enemy. That's the conundrum.